Oh, and just as a preface, I mistakenly structured my presentation for 10 minutes, but so if I seem like I'm rushing or skipping through information, I'm just trying to get it to 8 minutes. But my presentation is Consciousness and Artificial Intelligence, a philosophical perspective through the lens of motivation and volition. And my name is Jacob Su. My mentor was Aditya Sarif, and currently I am a sophomore at Bellarmine College Preparatory in San Jose, California. Now, the reason why I'm interested in this topic is I'm sure all of you have at least thought about at least once what it'd be like if AI were to take over the world. And I'm sure Hollywood has definitely considered that question over the years. If you all remember the movie I, Robot with Will Smith, that movie kind of depicted humans being enslaved by robots, and we're all waiting for our one savior, Will Smith, to come in and free the human race. But after his last showing at the Oscars with the whole slap situation, I think him being a savior is a far off chance. But what I was really interested in thinking about these questions of the end of the world of AI or super intelligent AI that seems almost human, it really got me wondering what makes a human? And that's what I want to consider in today's presentation. What qualities make an AI seem more human-like? So as a quick roadmap, we'll first be going over philosophical concepts like consciousness, motivation, and volition, and then exploring the relationships between those philosophical concepts. And then finally, we'll apply them to AI to make some predictions on how a motivated or conscious AI would look like. Now, let's go over the very vague definition of consciousness. Now, consciousness within philosophy is a very hotly debated topic. There's no clear definition. To give you a general idea of what consciousness is, it varies by profession, but within philosophy, it usually refers to one's subjective experience of the world. So it would be how you perceive your outer world, like with your touch, sense of smell, and also how you perceive your inner world with your thoughts and emotions. In neuroscience, it's quite similar, but it more focuses on the biological processes of mental phenomena. So like your memory, your emotions, thoughts, five senses, and really focusing on the biological processes of them. Now, within modern day philosophy on the topic of consciousness, there's a huge debate with dualism versus materialism. Basically, materialism is saying that consciousness only exists because of biological processes within our brain. And one big proponent of materialism in today's philosophy is Daniel Dennett, who essentially argues there's no other reason for why we are able to experience what we do besides biological processes. Now, on the other side of the coin, there's people like David Chalmers, who are dualists. They basically say that there's a separation between the body and the mind. They don't know exactly what the realm of the mind consists of, but they know that it's something more than just physical substance. And so they're trying to consider the big reason as to why we have that subjective experience. Now, for my paper, I looked at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for their benchmark of consciousness. And what I found was really interesting is that they considered self-awareness as a benchmark for consciousness. So a being that is aware of not only their thoughts, feelings, senses, all that subjective experience, but also the fact that they're aware of that awareness. And I really resonated with this benchmark for this project because my goal was to find out what AI or what makes AI human-like. And we tend to prescribe human-like qualities with self-awareness. Now, let's explore motivation and volition. Generally, as an overview, motivation is why one behaves how they do, and volition is the power of using one's will to act on those motivations. Now, Kurt Lewin and Narcissus Ack are two of Germany's most famous psychologists, and their perspective, more detailed within philosophy, is that motivation as a goal-setting process is based on two categories. First, desirability, where you weigh your positive and negative consequences when you're thinking of setting a goal or setting an achievement for yourself. And then next, you'll consider feasibility, considering whether you have the necessary abilities, time, and resources to complete that goal. And then finally, the process of volition is just putting those goals into action. It includes planning it, so thinking of the when, where, and how to direct that behavior, as well as the actual execution of it, which is decisive and intentional. So let's consider the relationships between all three of these processes. Motivation and self-awareness have the most interesting relationship out of the three, which is that consciousness acts as an initiator of motivation. Essentially, it boils down to consciousness being necessary for motivation. This is because you need that aspect of self-awareness in order to know what your desired outcomes are. You have to be self-aware in order to know what you want. So you need consciousness to fulfill the first category, desirability. Next, you also have to be aware and self-aware of what capabilities you have, as well as the environment around you, which determines the second category of feasibility. Now, the relationship between volition and consciousness is not so concrete as with motivation. This is because volition is more of a cold process. It can be more mechanical, so it doesn't really require self-awareness. In fact, even advanced computer programs can have volition without consciousness. Right now, I would argue that machine learning technology and ChatGPT and Google Bard are already using volition. They're given programming by the people who created the programs, and they're just acting on them. Now, let's apply this to artificial intelligence. Within history, there's been some considerations between something called weak and strong AI. Now, the most prevalent thought experiment covering this topic was the John Searle Chinese room argument. And it was a thought experiment basically consisting of considering that someone is placed within a room and they're given commands in Chinese through a paper or a code of some kind. Now, if they truly understood Chinese, they'd be able to enter back out an output that responds to the question. However, the catch is that someone within that room could use a manual that explained the Chinese language to them, and they could easily respond to whatever command they're given or question they're given, even without understanding the Chinese language. So this thought experiment brought up the fact that AI could just exhibit conscious behavior, but that wouldn't actually demonstrate it having genuine and true understanding of a subjective experience. John Searle labeled weak AI as being able to operate based on programmed tasks. Let's say it was an AI in that box, and it was just given the programming to correlate different Chinese characters with different Chinese responses. That wouldn't mean that it understands the Chinese language fully like a human does. So he considered strong AI, which has a true understanding and has that subjective experience. But the problem there is that defining that strong AI and recognizing that strong AI is extremely difficult and vague. So now let's explore how our relationships that we explored earlier with motivation and volition can help us identify what that AI might look like. So when considering a motivated AI, the first sign is that it has the ability to set goals for itself. As I stated earlier with volition, many advanced computer programs right now can already carry out programs that they're given, which demonstrates volition. But if it were to set goals for itself, then that would demonstrate the more important factor of motivation. And because we already know that consciousness is necessary for motivation, if we were able to observe an AI making goals for itself, then we'd also be able to observe that it's also consciousness. And some other factors in seeing this is that it utilizes its base programming to gain more knowledge. So it's not just acting on whatever pre-programmed commands it was given, it's actually seeking out more knowledge to inform its own motivations, similar to how us humans do. And some other telltale signs is specific qualities like altruism or self-interest. Altruism would be a key indicator in realizing an AI has motivation, because if it were able to act on good morals entirely of itself, then that means it went through the whole process of desirability and feasibility as well, considering the different factors. And finally, we can also look at algorithms to kind of recognize what processes are within that AI to see if that decision-making process is similar to how it is within humans. And we can also see if it recognizes its own motivation process to see if it has that self-awareness. So in conclusion, there are some future directions that this study can be taken. We should consider, is motivated an AI enough to be human-like? Now, while setting motivations is good and all for seeming human, would it be enough alone? For example, we could consider other factors like emotions. Usually emotions lead to moral decisions. So there's many more factors at play that could consider to an AI being human-like. But for today, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Jacob. one question that came in is, according to the framework you provide, what criteria does a large language model like ChatGPT fulfill? And then where do you think it falls short of being AI as you define it?
Yeah, of course. So ChatGPT, I would say it's a very advanced artificial intelligence program or large language model, but it falls under just fulfilling the volition category. So it would only fill like half of what I described. It wouldn't actually fulfill motivation, because if it did, it would be able to set its goals for itself rather than relying on its previous programming.
Understood. Interesting. Well, thank you so much, Jacob.